G'day, naked baby dwarves. It is the coach. I really should have thought of a better introduction than that. It is all things talking Fyreslayers. We are with, is it Grimnir's favorite obsessed children? And I am very fortunate to have Travis Kelly, who has been playing them quite successfully in the meta. And I know you had recently just gone 3-2. I know they're not the easiest army to pilot right now. We're still trying to work things out. But I've got Travis here who is going to help me understand how on earth we're going to use Fyreslayers in 3rd edition. Because my challenge as I was going to call myself the coach, but just like a YouTube guy, is like I look through the results, Travis, and I look and I look and I look, and I've been looking at results now for months. And Fyreslayers hasn't really shown up in the top 10 in any tournament across the world. Like they might do well at a 1 day or something, but you're not seeing much happening in the two day kind of scheme. And I don't know quite yet, and I want to get your thoughts very soon, but like what is going on with Fyreslayers? How have you learnt about Fyreslayers in the new edition? And, let's build off that. But first things first, Travis, welcome. Hello. Introduce yourself to the internet.
Thank you. Travis Kelly. You might tell that I'm not from the UK, although I think most of your guests are from that direction. So out of Ohio, back in the States, and having fun, learning how to play Warhammer in the lead belt that is Nottingham. So consultant by day, gamer by night kind of attitude, and that's everything.
Did catch me off guard because we are streaming in the UK time, and it took me a second. I'm like, wait a second, there's no UK accent, because I noticed you from the Maximum Carnage or the Carnage series over in the UK at Element Games. So I was expecting a Brit, but it's nice to have you and talking dwarves. And there are rumors that you might merge with KO and we might have like a big war situation, but until that actually happens. All right. Until that actually happens, and I'll get your thoughts maybe at the end. But how are Fyreslayers going so far? Like just general 3rd edition type things. How's it going?
I think it's nice that the list is branching out a little bit more. It feels like it's an army that plays in a lot of different phases at this point, as opposed to just being in combat. You're going to see more unique lists, I think, at this point because of the loss of the battalions. So I think it's a good time to play Fyreslayers, less stress in trying to take a single list that is heavy on one trick, I want to say, and get to stretch your muscles a little bit more and see how you can kind of finagle your way into victory, which I think is a fun part of the game.
Yeah, and for anyone who hasn't seen this show before, and we're doing this, new structure, very much I'm going to try to get Travis's thoughts on some of those key changes that have happened in 3rd edition. And I want to kind of see, has it been a positive, a negative? Has it changed his list design? Get some other thoughts around like the meta, and obviously we are in a bit of a weird hero hammer, mortal wound kind of meta right now. So I want to hear like what's going on. I'm going to ask him about monsters. I'm going to show you one of his lists, and we'll kind of put it all together. But for now, I want to hear from everyone in the comment section as well. If you're watching this on replay, where are you standing on your Fyreslayers? Because there isn't a lot. And where I was going to go earlier was that prior to 3rd edition, you didn't see a lot of Fyreslayers plays to begin with. It was a very niche army. And it was like, you'd see like 1, maybe 2 in a tournament scene. It was very rare that you saw Fyreslayers. So coming into 3rd edition, I haven't really seen a lot. So it's really hard to know what the blueprint of success is. I look at Daughters of Cain, there's Marathis, there's bow snakes, that there's going to be X and Y. You look at Lumineth, there's certain builds. But as a Fyreslayer player, it's quite hard to know which lodge. How do I get around not having Lords of the Lodge? Has my Urgold rune kind of sequence changed? But let's go 3rd. Let's talk 3rd edition first. How have you found your Fyreslayers in 3rd?
I think they do well in 3rd edition. I think the condensing of the board size makes it easier to get to the objectives. The fact that you don't need to be on all the objectives, you can kind of just take your core battlesmith with his units to push forward onto 2 of them and try and hold those 2 objectives. and then keep something in reserve for if you lose that third turn and they're going to destroy the objective you're on. You still have control of one of those, and then you have a faster unit to try and get onto the remaining objective if you need it at that point. So I think they play well this edition. There's a lot of command points out there to throw around. You want your opponent to use their command points in phases that they weren't planning on doing that with all-out defense, something along those lines. So getting them to burn through their command points, I think, is one of the keys.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, the board has changed, right? And I think that's probably one of the reasons Lords of the Lodge was so popular, was because in the old edition with such a large board, you'd be waddling for 2-3 turns until you actually got into combat without some type of coming in from reserve mechanic. But now that the board has changed, and we were talking a little bit earlier off stream, is one of the other key changes that have happened is that your army isn't stretched out nearly as far as it used to be. There used to be 4, 5, 6, 8 objectives at some point. And Fyreslayers aren't that type of army that likes to be stretched. You've always got, really tight bubbles. You have heroes that are hugging a unit or two because you've got, 12-inch kind of buff ranges. So spreading out really deep across the board was always a bad strategy for Fyreslayers. And now that the board is condensed, both, width and depth, there's less objectives. It kind of feels like it's actually playing a lot to your strengths. Yeah.
And I think it feels like the zones that people are given to deploy within has also benefited the Fyreslayers a little bit. The pizza oven, the magma forge, needs to be in your own zone. And I think in second edition, the zones that you could deploy your army in tended to be a little bit tighter than the current game. So it's been nice from that perspective as well.
Yeah, actually, when I think about the pizza oven, the magma, or what is it called? The magma oven.
Forge.
The magma forge. Yeah, the magma forge. I'm having pizza tonight, actually. So, but you're right. When I think about it, and when I play a lot against Fyreslayers in the past, it would be like a one-use only type of thing. You'd use it for turn 1 and you'd almost move off it, maybe turn 2, but rarely was it something that interacted in the late game. But you're finding that it's got, because of the board and the deployment and all that, you're getting a bit more value from it.
You get a little bit more value from it. Also, prayers have kind of taken a step forward in the game. So you've got your curse, the 3 that are natural to everybody, plus the ones that are on your battalion. Taking a 4 to a 3, I think, is pretty strong with the forge consistently. So you're getting the Prayer of Ash off more often. I've been trying to get curse to work in just about every list I play. 9 inches hurts. So eventually I just got to drop it and realize that the Magma Forge is theirs for setting up getting double turned. So I want to use it at the start of a battle round. If I lose the double turn, then I've still got a 6-up ward on all the heroes that don't have a ward of that kind.
It's also cool because with the new enhancement kind of feature, you could get, if you are going down obviously the prayer build, you could actually go double press. You could have all of your rune smiters and things like that having 2 options, but giving you a bit more flexibility if you want to go for the extra command or whatever it might be with things like Warlord.
Oh, yeah. Ember Storm is a great late game ability. Getting those dwarves to have a 10-inch move and then a charge really helps you get to where you want to be on the board if you've won the early game.
What about things like, and I'm imagining this doesn't impact you very much, but I'm curious to ask, things like reinforcements, because I remember in the past, a lot of Fyreslayers opponents would do big blobs. They would do big blobs of Hearthguard Berserkers, or is it Ulrich Hearthguard? They would just do these blocks of 15 or what felt like 30, but probably weren't 30. But they were always big blocks. You didn't really see a lot of those multiple small units across the board. How's reinforcements kind of manipulated or changed your list?
I think Fyreslayers want to play an MSU at this point because their buffs are auras. So I've kind of said, all right, I don't think I need to bring, first edition, it was blocks of 30 Volkite Berserkers. Throw them onto an objective by tunneling up and see if your opponent could kill everything in time. Second edition definitely felt like it was the Hermdar list with big blocks of the Ulrich Berserkers, Hearthguard Berserkers, and attack first, pile in a second time, move your way through your opponent that way, doing mortal wounds on 6s to hit. Now, you still got the Battlesmith, who's going to give you your +1 save to everything within 12 inches. You've got your 4-up after save when you're within that hero range. So those buffs to those guys work well in units of 5 because it doesn't matter how big the block is. So the MSU, I think, is the way to go with Fyreslayers right now. Maybe 1 or 2 units of bigger. I've tried a bigger unit of Ulrich Hearthguard, popping up and then trying to bring down some sort of behemoth.
And Sam's actually brought up a really interesting point, because the other component to that is that you've now got the new coherency rules. So while you probably will find most lists are okay, right? If you're playing that traditional 2K list and you've got 4 reinforcement points, you're probably okay with how you used to run your army. But the other side is going to be the coherency and how that impacts you from having, the way you would normally, you mentioned right at the top of the show, string out your army, and how that impacts, because you're on 32 mil bases on average. You don't really have any 25s. Right. And anything that would have a 1-inch attack, you're losing if you go really deep.
Yep. So yeah, Volkite Berserkers are, even at a unit of 10, they're not the easiest thing to get into combat, and to get all of them into combat is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so and it probably goes back to why you might not want to go all in on the big hordes of Fyreslayers, just purely because you're losing a lot of attacks, and the coherency does make things a little bit harder. But
I think the Berserkers with the pole axes or just the regular broad axes, they still work well in their larger units because they are a 2-inch range on those attacks. So they're still good. Your magma pipes in combat are only 1 inch, but while they're not horrible in combat, you're not trying to have your magma pipes in melee combat early on in the game. So bigger blocks are okay there as well, I think.
I guess the coherency rule will help you, because those really tight, I always found that your buff ranges are always quite low compared to those generous 18, 24-inch bubbles. So I guess I know I've caught out a couple of Fyreslayers players in the past where they've been in combat, they've piled in one model outside of that 12 inches, and that's denied them the ability to fight again. Yeah. But with the coherent, and there's just that one model trying to wrap around. But now that you can't really do that, I guess it works with the way your army's kind of built.
And you also, I might be wrong, so the internet will catch us, but I don't think you have the ability to attack twice anymore with Fyreslayers.
I can't remember how you got that rule.
I think it was a battalion. I think it was one of the
battalion.
Yeah, and now that battalions are gone, you get more models into the list than you did previously from paying for battalions, but you don't have those special abilities anymore. You still, I think with Hermdar, you still have the option to go first, but you don't have the option to go a second time.
Speaking of battalions, while I quickly look this up and try to cover my own ass, how have you found Lords of the Lodge? Because that was something that was quite common. Like most armies, it was in the Lords of the Lodge. Bloody hell! Yeah, there you go. That was something that was staple across the board. It was almost like you couldn't take a Fyreslayers list without Lords of the Lodge.
So, like I said, losing Lords of the Lodge is a huge downgrade to their melee combat. That second pile in after a first attack is just going to kill whatever you were in combat with, I think. But you get to trade that for having another unit of something, because Lords of the Lodge was 100-something points at the time. You were probably taking, I think Andy Hughes was taking 2 battalions. So he just has more dwarves in his list now. Lofnir, I think, is a fun unit because of the monster meta. The ability to pop up a priest within 12 inches of something and say, I'm going to blow that up. So all of my magma pipe units have +1 to hit, +1 to wound. If it's a monster you're going for, which you're going to see in this meta, you're going to have an additional point of damage to it. You're going to reduce its attack. If it lives, it's going to have -1 to hit. So I think that's a benefit to the MSU, is just multiple opportunities to roll a 4-up against monsters.
So that leads me to a couple of extra questions. I was going to lead you somewhere else, but you've already raised you've raised this question. So let's stay on the monsters, right? Because we are in a meta right now where it's got a lot of hero hammers. So your Archaons, your Marathis, blah 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 blah. Then you've got a lot of really high armor save, 2-ups, 3-ups, a lot of mortal wounds being thrown around, especially when the dragons come. But there's also other armies, whether it's bow snakes, there's a lot of mortal wounds being thrown around. How are you finding them in the meta, right? Because you don't have that hero hammer. Your best hero is a Magmadroth from a wounds perspective. And it's not that durable. It's not that durable. I mean, yes, you can put amulet on it, but it's not Arcane. How are you finding that?
In terms of a hero hammer, I think you're right. It's always fun to mess around with. I'm trying to remember which subfaction it is where you can spend a command point to have all of your heroes attack when the first hero goes, and you get additional artifacts with it. Those are fun lists to play around with. I don't think they're particularly great.
Is it the Grey Feared 5?
That might be it.
Yeah, I'm just reading like the command ability in if you pick a fight. Yeah, if they're not mounted on a Magmadroth, they can immediately fight afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I think your point about Magmadroths and mortal wounds. I think there's two good ways to get mortal wounds out of this list. There's the Berserkers, who are going to do with the poleaxes 2 mortal wounds on a 6 to hit. That's one of the better ways. And then the Magmadroths themselves are where mortal wounds come out. You've got the command ability on a 2-up when you charge to do d6 mortal wounds to them. You've got your Magma Breath, which as long as you're up against hordes, is going to do a decent amount of mortal wounds to those guys. You're rolling a d6 if you're within 6 inches. You've got your Tail, which is going to do d3 at the end of combat. And then if they hit you,
the splash mortals. If
they hit you, you're gonna bleed on them, and they're gonna take mortal wounds that way. In terms of the resilience, they're certainly not Arcane, but I think running them as Bash Brothers, so 2 Rune Sons on Magmadroth is my favorite way to do it. You've got keep them within 6 inches so that you're re-rolling all of your hits rolls, and then your wounding is fairly good on a Magmadroth, but then you're giving them 2 mount traits. The first one is to reduce rend on your primary. So whoever's going to be leading that charge, reducing rend on melee attacks against them. And then the second one within 6 inches is going to be re-rolling ones to save. And then you're on a 4-up save regularly, and you can give them both an after save. So one's on a 5-up after and one's on a 6-up after. So at 14 wounds, there's some resilience in that at this point.
Yeah. Plus, add the fact that you can obviously heal yourself through one of the heroic actions, and also the monstrous rampages as well. Does that mean that Magmadroths are worth reconsidering? Because I remember there was a time where people hated Magmadroths. Then you had one Magmadroth maybe in the list because you just wanted to fill up your army full of bodies.
Sure.
And I know you've got 2 in your list, and we will go through your list, later in the show. But is it now a good time to reconsider your Magmadroths because of, having more wounds and, being a commander in a battalion? You've got yourself some more durability, some healing, and what I just mentioned, things like Monstrous Rampage. Because Raw, for example, is such a good ability. Even Titanic Jewel. I love using Titanic Jewel.
I'm going to throw out the ability to destroy terrain. I think I played entirely too many Seraphon lists this weekend, and I'm not a huge fan of the chip damage that comes out to Fyreslayers because there's not a great way to get rid of it. But being able to run up the board, get into combat, and then destroy that terrain piece that's housing a couple different things, it's key for some armies to get rid of some of their power.
Might be good because the Seraphon just got new updates to their allegiance ability, so now all the terrain in their side is going to be mystical, giving them a 6-up ward. So nice little way to shut it down. I just find that I never have enough monsters, and Smash to Rubble is always like the least of my priorities. It's either Raw, Stomp, or Titanic Jewel, and then maybe Smash to Rubble.
Right. A smash to rubble is just I think it's a tactical decision, right? If they've got a strong terrain piece that's giving you grief, I think there's a couple armies out there that do that. Ossiarch Bone Reapers. I just don't want to deal with those type of terrain pieces. If I could get to the Lumineth terrain piece, I would destroy it. But
that's part of the problem, getting to it. Like, as I used to run Mega Gargants, and like I really want to smash your terrain. And like old OBR terrain would be in the center of the board, so I just break it every time. But there were some things of just at the back, like, you know, the Beast Claw Raider, the Beast of Chaos, like Herdstone. I'm like, it's too much effort. I can't get to it. I'm just going to ignore it.
Sure, stomp and shout my way to victory, right?
That's it. What was I going to ask you something? I was going to ask you. I had a good question. New war scrolls. This is not the question I was going to ask you. It'll come back. I'll be in the shower and I'll be thinking about this. Like, Trevor's like, that's right. You got 2 new war scrolls.
Sure.
And Broken Realms, you saw, was it the Doom Seeker war scroll and the Grim Wrath Berserker got an update? Any thoughts?
I have not used them yet, so my thoughts are just theorycraft, I guess, at this point. I was mentioning the list where your leaders can all attack at the same time with the command point. Those lists, I think, would do great with piling in those guys because they don't count in your hero pool, I don't think. They're kind of other.
Yeah, because they're like Gotrek, where they don't have the leader profile, but they've got some really.
I think they don't have the here. Yeah, there's a unique bit to it, or at least there was in second edition, where you could bring 6 leaders and then have a whole bunch of
they're heroes. They're hero. I'm just looking at it now. They're hero keyword, but their battlefield role is not leader. So it means you can put them into Hunters of the Heartland, like Gotrek.
Yep.
You can use heroic actions on them, and they can issue and receive their own command, but they're not going to count as one of your 6 heroes. So
yeah, I really liked the Berserker in the previous phases or in the previous editions because of his ability to have the save after the save. You ran him forward, you got him into combat, and you usually did some decent work. But I have not put him into any lists in this edition.
Fair. So I know, like, even like when I was looking at like the Grimwrath Berserker, I thought it had some really interesting rules when you look at the Grimwrath Oath and some of the things you could do. Yeah. And I have seen lists in the past, but when you start looking at the 100-odd points, I think it's a bit hard because points have changed. And although it could, you know, a lot of people are putting Gotrek into Hunters of the Heartland, and this is another one that kind of fits into it because it's a troop.
I mean, Gotrek into any order list is probably better than the list that doesn't have him at this point, which, you know, is a little sad.
Is he worth considering for Fyreslayers? Sure.
He's so good at what he does, and that's run forward, sit on an objective, and kill anything that gets near it. There's a couple answers out there for him, but anything in my list, the 2 Magmadroths are what would drop to put in Gotrek at this point. It probably makes the list better. At least that's the opinion of several of the Dragon Slayers. So, you know, I'm handicapping myself, I guess, in their opinion.
It's a narrative list. But I think for anyone who wants to run Gotrek in Fyreslayers, definitely makes sense. Again, he's not going to get any allegiance ability, but he does look actually good, and he actually does look like he fits in your army versus like Daughters of Cain running around. Like, why are you here?
My understanding is he doesn't like the Fyreslayers, which is why he's not in the list. There's just a good old-fashioned hatred, I guess.
A bit of jealousy. I'll be remiss if I didn't ask you about megas. Same kind of thing. Would you consider a mega? You can get Bundo, the Kraken Eater, who can kick the objective. He's obviously 35 wounds. Doesn't count as 20 on an objective, but he does count as 5.
Yeah, I had him in a second edition list because of the shenanigans you could pull with. Is it Fury of Grimnar, where a hero gets to attack in the hero phase? And it was the only, in second edition, it didn't have a Fyreslayers keyword. So you could get a giant to attack in the hero phase, which was a bit cheeky, I guess, is the UK definition.
Yeah, I love it. And I got to call out this comment as well. So Matt Davis is a perfect comment. He said the biggest issue with Gotrek in Fyreslayers is he's wearing pants, and we all know Slayers don't like that. Matt, look, you can hobby your Gotrek and make him wear a thong or something. You do you. I'm not here to judge you, folks. Run your Gotrek however you want to run him.
Nice.
All right, well, getting us back on track from underpants wearing Gotrek.
Sure.
You were alluding to the lodges a little earlier, and I know in the past you saw, is it Vostarg and Hermdar were the two more popular of the lodges, or at least maybe that was my perception.
Yeah, and I agree.
Has that changed? Has that changed? Like, is it now time to reconsider some of the other lodges, or are they still just the good options?
I think Hermdar has definitely taken a step down without having Lords of the Lodge. Volstagg is interesting because of your run and charge ability in the first phase, and we're much closer together. So if your strategy is to send all of your angry dwarves across the board, get stuck in immediately, I think that could work. I do feel that people screen relatively well. So if you're across the table, turn one, you're killing chaff. And then if you took the first turn, they're in a comfortable position because they're about to bring down all of their firepower upon your 60 angry dwarves that just hustles across the board. Lofnir is my favorite because of the monster meta, and I think the shooting is necessary. It's not overbearing from the Fyreslayers, but it definitely puts pressure on your opponent in a phase because you've got all the throwing axes coming at them. You've got the magma pipes trying to bring down a particular unit by focusing on it, and you're going to make them think about using a command point for all-out defense in a phase that you wouldn't think you need to use it for Fyreslayers. And that loss of a command point is going to make a difference later on.
Have you found you've got more command points now than you had in the past? Like, has that been helpful for your type of army, being able to get more run rolls? Because you never really had a lot of command points. Obviously, you had the battalions, but it wasn't like you were CP rich. And I always felt like you would be the type of army that would benefit from having more CP.
Yeah, I think, rally is, if you're bringing a big block, which we've kind of talked about that you're not necessarily with Fyreslayers, rally is really strong because you're bringing back 2 units for each 6 in a big block. I think redeploy is still the strongest command point that's out there. Just taking an MSU unit and going, okay, now I'm D6 inches further away on your charge is huge. All-out attack, all-out defense I want to say all-out defense is great for when a unit's going to get focused. So the battle tactics, someone says they want to kill your battle line, having the ability to move further away to deny a charge or to give yourself all-out defense, just to make sure that one unit lives and you deny your opponent 2 to 3 victory points. That for me is where you want to keep your command points. Yeah.
And it's also good because you can also redeploy forward. Like I've been playing around with redeploying onto objectives and like sneaking on or like repositioning, and there's a lot of cool things you can do, which kind of then leads me to Urgold. I want to talk about Urgold because it's a really cool ability, and you obviously the choice. I always found that choosing the right Urgold at the right time can be tough, right? Because you don't want to burn the good stuff early, and you really want it later. And one of the things that AOS 3 has done is removed a lot of rerolls. A lot of rerolls have disappeared, yet here we are. The Rune of Fury, as example, is a reroll once. Yeah. So you can get all out attack to get +1 to hit, and then reroll ones just to like supercharge your army.
Oh yeah.
How are you looking at your runes? Are you finding some are now more valuable than others? Are there ones that you're always taking? Like, what's the strategy and thoughts around your Urgold?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Look, listen, Travis. This is not a phone a friend show. You can't just call your mate.
Guys, I need answers. Yeah. I think you're always using the reroll ones at some point because it's one of the few abilities that's going to impact your shooting. Most of the stuff is melee dependent. The additional rend is huge, but it's only melee attacks. Let's see, 6s to do an additional point of damage is pretty nice. But I think that might be a special ability. I find that the extra 2 inches, I like to use it to get my magma pipes into position to shoot something that they wouldn't have been able to shoot. But then I also find at the end of the game, if I just had 2 more inches, that charge would be that much easier. That's a hard one to decide whether to use it early or late in game. The +1 to bravery is my throwaway. So, if I'm a high drop army, I think they're going to make me go first. I'm probably using my +1 bravery at that point, just because I don't know where the damage is going to go. It gives me an opportunity to not lose some models if things get taken off the board. So let's see. What else am I missing? Oh, the throwing axes. I've run out of options. That's the only one that can do me a little bit more damage. So I'll make throwing axes forced to hit.
The Rune of Searing Heat as well is a good one, but you just rely on that hitting. So you got to pull off obviously the 1 to 5, which is no problem as long as you get a 6. But then you got the other 6, which is adding the +1. So I mean, if you got a high volume of attacks, Searing Heat is great. Mm-hmm. But it's so swingy, right? Compared to reroll 1s to hit, improve the rend, add 2 to the movement. Add 2 to the movement, and then if you happen to get the enhanced effect of +2 to the charge, that's gold. Especially when there's things like Khorne Demon Princes out there that are halving run and charge rolls and things like that. Getting a +2 can be the difference between hitting the charge, especially when people are using like redeploy with that. It's always that 1 or 2 that just kind of stops you from the charge. But the fact that you got a whole bunch of rerolls, or even like when I look at like Awakened Steele, right? Improve the rend by 1, so what? With some of the things that are happening with just safe stacking, that could be a way to either force your opponent to spend a command point to use all-out defense, or it actually might be enough rend to then cut through the safe stacking that might be available in the game.
Definitely. On the broad axes, which are already at -1, it's definitely -2. It has the opportunity to get you to -3, which is just huge at that point. But it's also army-wide. So with the MSU, I think you're going to have combats in multiple places. The Fyreslayers are I think, strong enough to not have to worry about, yes, there's going to be the primary attack that I want to do first, but you can be in combat with other things with smaller units and hit them back so that they're fighting in multiple places. They're not able to save stack as much as they would like at that point.
The other consideration I've got with Fyreslayers, and you tell me what you think about this crack theory, right? I've got a crack theory. Is at the top of the show, I mentioned that we are in a hero hammer moving into a high mortal wound meta. It feels like the pendulum is starting to swing, and some of the tournament players are thinking about mortal wound protection. And I can see a world where very, very soon, especially when those dragons start coming in, is that things like Nurgle, things like Nighthaunt, anything that's got a high mortal wound save or the ability to shrug wounds is going to be worth its weight in gold. And I feel like Fyreslayers fits that nicely. Maybe not as good as Nurgle, but I think you might have some tools to not only deal the mortal wounds, but absorb the mortal wounds. Am I on the money, or do you think that maybe Fyreslayer, or maybe I'm overestimating what Fyreslayers do in the mortal wound protection era?
Well, we're talking, I guess, key ways that mortal wounds come out are spells, right? So the Null-Cidian icon on the Battlesmith is huge for a 4-up just to ignore spell effects. So there's a little bit there. You're able to take the mortals that are going onto your heroes onto the magma pipes on a 4-up kind of body save. And then, of course, your berserkers with the poleaxes have the 4-up after save. And then if you burn the piece oven, everybody has a 6-up. So they have options. Certainly not as strong as Nighthaunt and Maggotkin, but they're I think they can absorb it once or twice. Too much more, and you're gonna fall over because your key pieces are gonna get removed.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you are Death, right? Because Death just has it in addition to everything else they do. But I think you have the save better than others, but maybe not as good as Nurgle, as an example.
And you've got a decision, which is always the hard part, as to when to give yourself that benefit, right? With consuming the Magma Forge for just a 6-up after, or even the Runic Firewall, right? The Runic Firewall has the opportunity to give you a save. It's difficult to deploy, and I think that's the challenge with it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. One other question I kind of wanted to ask you before I kind of get to your list is actually two questions. One, is there any units that maybe in second edition people didn't use, or it wasn't as common, that now maybe is worth considering? And I know we talked a little bit earlier about the Magmadroths, and maybe it's a good time. Yeah. Is there anything else that maybe is a little bit of a sleeper at the moment?
I mean, I've kind of talked about the two that are the big ones for me. It's the Magma Pipes, I think, are better this edition than they have been previously. I mean, they were good last edition, but the meta is making me want to take them. And then the Magmadroths, which we've mentioned, you have to bring a priest to make Lofnir work. So those are the three key units, or the top tier, that weren't previously top tier. So there's always the Battlesmith, and there's always the Berserkers. So
no, I like it. And who are your allies? I've had this mind blank. So you've got Dispossessed, Ironwield, KO, and Stormcast.
And that's gone up, right? That was in second edition. We didn't have nearly as many options as we do now, I think.
And that might have been changed. I'm looking at your battle tome. That might have been updated to be Cities of Sigmar, maybe. But have you thought about bringing in any allies from KO or Stormcast? Because I know Stormcast got a lot of cool options, and maybe you're tempted to bring in a dragon, a Stormdrake, when it comes out.
Yeah, fair. I mean, why not, right? Put a dwarf on top of it.
I remember one of my friends did actually make like a Duarden Celestin Prime, and it was very cool, like a very cogsmithy kind. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think that could work. But would you consider any allies in your list, or are you finding yourself just too tight with your points?
I think I am not branching out far enough in that direction yet. So I'm not going through the books looking for what are the key allies. I think I'm playing within the book and trying to optimize things in that way. I think that's probably the next step as I try and get better as a player, is to find those units that I can ally and just do what I want better. So.
Yeah, no. I think obviously it depends on where the meta goes, right? Like I could see a good use for things like little gun haulers, right? Being able to fly high, dropping your opponent's territory, score those easy battle tactics, or if you're finding yourself, not being able to handle some of these units at long range, because you don't have the longest range out there. And if we happen to go into like long strikes, bow snakes, that type of, how do you reach out and touch them? Yeah. Maybe again, a gun hauler or some type of KO would be good.
If you had some ability to just amplify the movement of dwarves, 18 inches shooting range with a 4-inch move is not a whole lot of threat range for people. I think your opponent can pretty well maneuver around those kinds of bubbles. 30 inches without line of sight is extremely easy. But if you had the ability to fly high and redeploy where you wanted it to be, yeah, I think there's a strength in that.
Which kind of leads into what Samuel's asked in the chat, which is around, how are you handling, or how are you finding handling these heavy shooting armies that are always going for your heroes? Like the first lesson I learned as a Fyreslayer opponent was shoot the heroes. And I know it's a bit of a joke, but it is more true with Fyreslayers than most armies, because your power is so amplified by your heroes. And if you have those Lumineth archers fishing for 5s or 6s, if they got Lambert Light, your bow snakes who are double shooting with, mortals on 6s, your heroes are not traditionally like large wounds, so they'll eventually go down.
Right.
How are you finding handling the, protecting your heroes or having a bunch of heroes around?
Yeah, I'm wanting them to worry about the other threats. right? So I'm hoping my opponent doesn't realize that if they just kill this one hero, that things start to fall apart for me, which is not a great strategy. So the Ulrich Hearthguard are next to all of the heroes to help take those wounds. So turning a 6 wound model into a 9 wound model, in essence. That's the goal there, to help them survive just a little bit longer. And then you want to put the big terrifying thing in their face to kind of distract them. So two Rune Sons on Magmadroth coming up the flank, they're going to be into them turn 2 and start causing havoc. So that's a distraction. The big block, or it was a big block of 15 magma pipes going for techless. That was a distraction. So it's smoke and mirrors for the most part. Don't shoot my battlesmith off the table turn 1, please.
Well, if you're an opponent and you just heard Travis's strategy, don't shoot off. Right? All right.
I asked nicely.
As Sam said, don't pay attention to that dwarf behind the curtain tactic. Like, ignore him. Don't worry about that. Like, do what I do. Like, just try to pump up your other. Oh, you wouldn't want to get this charge off. Oh, you don't want to get shot by my.
You know, it's going to shoot magma at you and do D6 mortals. It's going to charge and do D6 mortals. It's going to stop its tail and do D3 mortals. It's got 9 attacks, all at -2, doing D3. It's
re-rolling ones. But Anthony Lowe kind of actually like ruined Christmas. No, he didn't actually ruin Christmas, but he actually made a really good point around, you know, Hearthguard, Auric Hearthguards becoming a strong part of the Fyreslayers army. And lo and behold, here is an army list that you are playing around and put together. And I thought it'd be kind of good just to talk through a little bit about like what your thinking is and rationale and why you're building the way you're kind of building. But we mentioned earlier that, you know, traditionally you would see things like Vostarg and Hundar. You've gone Lofnir. You've taken the dominating presence as the grand strategy with the Indomitable Triumph. You got yourself 2 Magmadroths, both being Auric Rune Sons, one with the Javelin, one with the War Axe. You know, Amulet of Destiny, Coalheart Ancient, Ashhorn Ancient with Battle Throne. So you've got yourself a nice little, you know, Magmadroth trait and artifact. So surprise, there's 2 Warlord battalions there. You got yourself Battlesmith, Rune Smiter, Rune Father. So you've gone like all the heroes. So most armies aren't running a lot of heroes. It's interesting that you've gone in and maybe replaced the fact that you can't have a 500, 700 point hero with just lots of, you know, little heroes. And then you've gone MSU, 5 Berserk Hearthguard, 5 Hearthguard Berserker, 10 Volkite Berserkers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of 5 Auric Hearthguard. And 1 drop, lol, try 14 drops. So you have not gone battle regiment, and I imagine it's just not worth it. Why? What, if you're already like over 3 drops, who cares? Just doesn't matter.
Go on.
But you've gone hunters and double warlord and tapping into 2 additional artifacts.
Yeah.
So like, what's the logic here? Like, why? You know, to Anthony Lowe's point, like, you know, Auric Hearthguard potentially being good. What's the thinking and what's the rationale and how does this list win?
All right. So the rationale is that I think the Nullcidian icon is bar none the best artifact for the Fyreslayers to take. So that's a 12-inch bubble. Roll a dice when you have a spell cast on you and a 4-up. You just kind of ignore the effects of it. It's, I think, one of the better answers. I've chosen to take 2 Magmadroths on Rune Sons, and I wanted to beef them up, which is why both of them have basically a 5-up and a 6-up ward save. And that's why the Warlord is in there. The 2 Warlords are in there, is the additional command points and the additional artifacts at this point. Are they the right decisions? That's for everybody else to decide, I think. It gives me a nice... The monsters, when they die, they give up a command point, or they give up a victory point. I'm trying to prevent that from happening, and I especially want to try and make it so that in a turn when they want to bring them down, it leaves them with doubt, and they overcommit resources, knowing that I can reroll ones to save. I've got the ward after that. They're on a 4-up save. I can give it best day ever when you decide to, I'm going to bring it down. So I can stack defense onto them just to try and keep it up and deny those victory points when it comes through. And they're good against hordes. So, going into Lumineth and their big blocks, Shining Company is going to be -1 to hit, which is not fun, just across the board. Their ability to give themselves plus to save from the quartz, they're surprisingly tanky. It's nice to have something that's just dishing out mortal wounds, either because it's breathing on them and there's 20 units in there, that it's charged and trying to get it, because they're not going to take a battle shock. 2 up from the one hero to prevent it, or spending the command point. So you're just trying to get as much damage against them as quickly as possible.
What's your bravery normally? Because your bravery
7s.
Okay, so really by going that multiple small units as well, because one of the changes obviously is that you can only have one inspiring presence essentially a turn. So being able to go these MSU style, you really don't need to worry about battle shock other than the 10 Volkite Berserkers.
Right. And I think there's an argument for getting rid of the Volkite Berserkers entirely and just replacing them with another Hearthguard Berserker unit. The Rune Father's in the list to make Hearthguard Berserkers Battleline. It's just I'm not sure what to do with the additional 40 some odd points that become available. There's not great options.
Do you find, because majority of your units are they a lot of your units, are they Battleline?
The only Battleline unit is Volkite Berserkers, and then you have to bring a specific general to make the others Battleline. So I was originally bringing the Rune Master, which was making the Hearthguard, the Ulrich Hearthguard Battleline. I felt like I was giving up too easy of a Battleline point because I was bringing a unit of 15 and 2 units of 5, and someone would decide that unit of 5 is what I'm going to do for my Battleline, and I didn't have a good answer for keeping them alive. I think the Hearthguard Berserkers at a unit of 5 on a 5-up, 4-up is the right way to go to try and prevent them from scoring that point, because I think the 4-up after save, it does a lot because it's essentially a save reroll.
Yeah, it's massive. And the reason I asked is, one thing that I've been thinking about lately is the role of Battleline. And yes, one of the cool things by having Battleline is you can double reinforce them. But then on the other side, it's a very easy way to give away broken ranks. Mm-hmm. So I've been trying to think about, how do I build a screen that isn't a Battleline option? And that kind of led to me my question, which ones are the Battleline? And you're obviously not screening with the Ulrich Hearthguard, right? So anything that's in your front line, your Berserkers, your Berserker builds, are all giving away broken ranks when they die. But you're trying to make it harder with the 10, and
yeah. I think with the shooting meta, people were picking out the Ulrich Hearthguard and going, that unit of 5 is going to die this turn, and you're not going to be close enough to do any damage to me. At this point, when they have me go first and move forward into the center of the board to score the objectives, I think the Hearthguard Berserkers can weather the storm, or at least force them to overcommit resources. If I lose a unit of 5 Hearthguard Berserkers turn 1 because everything shot them, they've done their job.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the Ulrich Hearthguard rules now. There's some interesting things, they're hitting on 4s or 5s depending if you're talking about the pike or the throwing. The throwing axe is always just a nice to have, right? They
Sure.
Go in, you throw a high volume, but it's more about maximizing. How do you maximize the magma pipe? Because when they're in range of the monster, or they're targeting a monster, you get the +1 damage, so that could really rock the socks, and you could potentially halve their move characteristic and subtract 1 to hit on a 4+. Man, so that's neat.
What makes them really good in MSU is the Lofnir command ability. Got to use the right words, hopefully. So your priests get a command ability that allows them to pick a unit within 12 inches, and all magma pipes that attack that unit get +1 to hit, +1 to wound. So you're going from 4s and 3s to 3s and 2s re-rolling ones in one of the turns from that. You're looking at 50 dice rolls trying to bring something down. If it's a monster, it's -1 doing 2 damage. So it can kill a giant in a turn. But that's pushing it.
Because you're not buffing a unit, right? What you're doing is you're debuffing an opponent's unit, and then anything that fights into that Mega Gargant, whatever it might be, gets a +1 to hit, to +1 to wound, and obviously using the Urgold rune to then get the re-roll. So it's not like, because initially I was thinking that it was a command ability to go, right, unit of Hearthguard, Auric Hearthguard, you get +1/+1. No, it's like the old Knight of Zeros where it's like, cool, I'm shining my light on Mr. Mega Gargant. Cool. Yep. Anything that fights Mr. Mega Gargant is now +1/+1. So
I wish it was anything. Unfortunately, it's only the magma pipes.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, like anything like, as in like the unit that I'm targeting. Yes, not specifically the melee weapons and the throwing axes.
Yeah. So that's where the Ulrich Hearthguard are getting their buff up. 125 points. And they're taking and they're going from those 4s and 3s, which is a bit iffy, to those 3s and 2s, which is huge. So they do good damage. And then later on, when they're in combat, throw out that -1 rend onto them. They're 1 attack each, 3s and 3s. The 1 attack each is not great, but the 3s and 3s is pretty good. So they're gonna have some punch later on in melee combat when you've lost your battle line at that point.
What was the thinking of having Prayer of Ash and Ember Storm as your prayers? And the reason I ask is because Prayer of Ash, when you're away from the pizza oven, is rolling on a 4.
Right.
So that's a 50-50 chance, right? And all you're getting really is, what is it, a +1 to your save?
Yeah, I think you can drop Prayer of Ash and take it and give them healing instead. And focus on trying to keep that Battlesmith alive with the Prayer of Healing in turn 2, somewhere around along those lines. Prayer of Ash is good on a big unit of Hearthguard Berserkers because they're up front. So you can use it early and try and buff up the unit that you think is going to get focused, or at least dissuade them from focusing one. Would be another way of approaching it. Ember Storm is in the list because of that run and charge. So late game, I've brought down like a unit of 5 has killed something and is now over on the right-hand side of the board, and then I need them in the middle of the board. Ember Storm is what's going to help me do that.
I could see the heal universal prayer being a good one, especially when you combine it with the heroic action of being able to heal as well, right? You could heal up to D6 or 2D3 wounds, which could, really boost up your Magmadroth as it's kind of degrading.
Yeah, definitely. The healing, I think, onto those heroes that are going to hopefully be able to stick around because of the bodyguard save from the Ulrich Hearthguard. You're going to have a hit point or 2 left after you get focused is the goal, and then heal them back and demoralize the opponent as they just tried to kill a hero and they ended up killing 2 Ulrich Hearthguard, and now that hero's back to full.
Would you consider bringing in something like the Arcane Tome to get yourself a wizard in instead of, like, obviously, keep you get the Amulet of Destiny, right? So you would need to take a 3rd Warlord or a commanding entourage.
Yeah.
But do you think like there's a place for Arcane Tome?
I don't think there's a place for Arcane Tome because I'm not that excited for an Arcane Bolt or a Mystic Shield or Flaming Weapon kind of buff on this list. You've got the heroic ability to deny a magic spell, which I think is much more powerful. So in a turn where you don't think you need the command point, or you don't think you want to do the heroic, best day ever kind of tactic, you can try and mess with your opponent's casting phase and give somebody 1 deny. And I think if I was bringing the artifact that made somebody a caster, I'm looking for denies.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Like, I was also thinking for the fact that we just talked earlier about, is it Prayer of Ash going on a 4? You've probably got a better likelihood if you want the +1 to your save or maybe you want to double down and get that stack, you
That's
could get an extra, Mystic Shield from Arcane Tome, in addition to Prayer of Ash, in addition to all the other ways you can get +1 to save, if you need to go down that route. But it feels kind of redundant when you have 139 wounds in your army.
Yeah, I think a 5-up save with being within the 12-inch bubble of the icon, giving you +1 there, +1 from all-out defense on whichever unit is being focused. That's, you're at least on a 6-up, 4-up at that point. And then if you could find a way to get a third one, it wouldn't go to waste. It's not as easy as it is in Slaves to Darkness to just give everybody multiple pluses to save. But you've got options there.
What's the thinking with Warlord? Because you've got Warlord, and you've wrapped up your Hearthguard Berserkers and your Volkite. So you've got your melee units all in Hunters. Mm-hmm. What's the thinking there? So
the melee units are going to be out front. Probably going to put the 10 Volkite Berserkers into the magma tunnel and deploy them as a speed bump somewhere to try and screen out to one side, depending on where they've deployed against me or where they're moving their army, and also get onto an objective. And I don't want them to be shouted at. I want them to have the ability to use all-out defense, to not get stomped for mortal wounds. So trying to reduce the damage there. The reason for the Warlord is the additional artifact and the additional command point. So I find that with having to go first, 2 command points is a bit of a challenge. Maybe not in the first turn, but later on, I'm going to want to try and use a command point for the Magmadroth to charge. And I'm going to want to have the command point for Lofnir to do its shooting. So I'm trying to make sure I balance, have they already used Destroy a Battleline? Have they already tried to kill the general? Have they already used Bring It Down? And I want to make sure I have command points to try and prevent those 3 battle tactics.
The Rune Sun, is it the smiter? Is that the teleporty? Not the teleporty one. Is that the one that you set into reserve?
Correct. The Rune Smiter is the priest that goes into reserve, and then a unit goes with them.
And when do they come up? Is there like a come in first turn 4 kind of thing?
The previous times I've played this list, they're the ones that are deploying a big block of Ulrich Hearthguard. So this is before I split it into MSU. They were basically point and shoot at a monster of some kind and be on the board where I wanted them to be. I don't think I played with them well in terms of, or at least they were too much of a target. So as soon as those came up, the opponent would weather the storm as best they could, and then they would destroy that block of 15 because they didn't want to go through it a second time. So splitting them into MSU, I think, makes those decisions harder for them. And now they're going to deploy early on to try and slow down the opponent from getting into objectives, because I don't care about the 10 Volkite Berserkers. They're there to prevent you from getting onto objective if possible, and probably die relatively quickly.
Has that also been helpful to score like Savage Spearhead, for example, like just tunneling up the Rune Smiter with 1 unit? Because then you got your 2 units in your opponent's backfield, and you score that battle tactic like that.
My goal is to score that battle tactic with the Rune Sons, because then I get a bonus point for them being a monster. So I haven't used it that way. I think a lot of the objective markers are in the center of the board. So deploying behind your opponent's army to score those 2 points, I think, is a kind of one, you've held on to them too long at that point, because you want to be using the ones that are to kill things early on, and then scoring the be in my opponent's territory later on in the game.
I remember another reason why I was going to mention to you Arcane Tome is Metamorphosis being able to turn into a monster. Sure. And then having the 3 monsters run. So that could be an option, but is it worth it for 1 additional battle tactic point, knowing that it is a spell that you're not going to get a lot of natural casts? And I find it's a bit swingy. It's good in theory. Like, turn my wizard into a monster and I run and they all get the extra point. But in practice, it becomes hard at times.
Fair. Yeah. It's a 6 to cast.
Yeah, it's a 6 or a 7, but
Yeah.
my opponents are always jerks and they always want to unbind it.
Fair. I don't know. Go ahead and cast it, and then I'll just shoot that wizard off the board and score an extra victory point.
Well, yeah, I mean, all you need to do is run it, right? And then you score the extra. But
Well,
it's
no,
just
that's
like
for you.
thinking.
That's still technically a monster in my turn. So if I can kill a wizard and get a monster point, hey.
Yeah, but I'm not. Yeah, but your ranges are. I mean, if you, I was going to say I would just keep outside of your buff ranges.
Fair.
But if you got tunneling shooters, then different story. You're coming for my face. But that's a good point as well. The fact that you don't have a lot of monsters means you're not giving away too many victory points. And if you're killing a monster every turn, you're scoring those extra you're scoring 1 extra victory point every time you kill a monster, obviously
Right.
capped once per round.
Yeah. So in this meta, I think you see a fair amount of monsters because people want those victory points from running. They want them from killing a battle line with a monster. Archaon's pretty good at it, as well as the giants. So they're out there. And if you can bring them down one a turn, I think you're in pretty good shape.
And maybe we kind of getting closer towards the end here, but how do you beat some of those meta armies and how are you handling Arcane? How are you handling Megas? How are you handling the Marathis and just like what's happening top table right now?
I think the answer is going 3 and 2. It helps me avoid some of that, but let's see. Giants are a consistent challenge. This list has the power to deal with it, but I think things still need to align. You need good objectives where a giant can't just kind of be on 3 hit points and still have more models than you. So you need to make sure it's off the objective, and you've got to get that done by round 2 or 3 at that point, just to try and keep the game close enough that you can score enough points at the end. Marathi, let's see. Last game I didn't use Fyreslayers against Marathi, so how would I deal with it? The shooting is going to be really good against Marathi, I think. So having a unit of 5, basically she's on a 4-up save. You're -1 on your rend. She's a monster, so you're doing 2 damage when it sneaks through on her. You're going to get plenty of opportunities to do 3. And if I can put something in combat with her in her phase with one of my melee units, that's going to bring her down quicker than I think the opponent would like her to come down.
I feel like your tunneling dwarves are going to be perfect to handle those snakes because you really want to kill the snakes. Marathi, you want to chip the wounds, but it's taking down those snakes so that they don't have a good option to hero phase fight. So, and I think that's part of the challenge for some armies is they don't get up there fast enough, and they get 2 solid turns, maybe even 3 of just double shooting bow snakes, and especially when you got that block of 15, and that kind of is the same for your cruel boys with your big bolt, your big killer bolts, your archers, your lumineth archers, anything like that. Getting in. And pew. And as long as you stay outside of 9 and don't let them like unleash hell and like don't get into that kind of just pew them before they pew you, you should be okay.
Yeah, cruel boys are their own kind of issue because if they put their unit of 9 into terrain and make it so that I can't technically see them, I don't have a good answer for that because I can't shoot them. I kind of just want to make sure that piece of terrain is off in some corner, and then I'll play on this side of the board and just avoid it as much as possible. I think sometimes, I've won games not killing anything but maybe 200 points worth of units, and that's because you're on objectives living and your opponent isn't.
Yeah. No, look, I like it. I think, the challenge with Fyreslayers is obviously, one, you don't have the hugest amount of models, right? And I think that's what's exciting some of the rumor mill right now, that there could be a combo book. Coach isn't saying it's coming. I'm not trying to leak you into some secret Games Workshop document. I don't know if it's a fact. It's just a rumor. The rumor that Grumdy or whatever the maker god is coming back. He's going to bring you all together. You're all going to be little friends. You're going to have, I don't know, Skype ports with Fyreslayers, and you're all going to like sing Kumbaya, sipping on Gold.
Doesn't sound like the Age of Sigmar universe singing Kumbaya. Give me some mounted cavalry Magmadroths, some little baby ones with dwarves on top of them.
I'd also like to see some non-hero Magmadroths. Like, I'd love to be able to run a Magmadroth without a rider, and drop it. I don't know, 100, 150 points, something like that. Just let it go.
Yeah. They had some cool stuff. I mean, the invocations, the Magma invocations look awesome. That Molten Infernoth, I think, it's just a cool looking model. And running it forward, doing some of that stuff would be awesome.
We didn't talk about that. Let's end it there, and let's talk about your endless spells, your endless prayers.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly if they've changed or how they've changed, but are they something that you've looked into, and are they worth considering?
Yeah, so I'm going to get this. I think the Runic Firewall is the one that I consider the most out of the three. Its warscroll definitely changed. So its mechanic is it prevents things moving through it unless they have the Magmadroth keyword or can fly, which catches your opponent out when you put it on the table. You tell them that the Magmadroths can move through it, but it's sitting in front of the Magmadroth, and for some reason their mind goes, they got to go around. And then all of a sudden this Magmadroth runs through this fiery wall at them. But the main thing about it is that it's another ward save, I think. So if you are running a big block of Volkite Berserkers and you want to give them a ward save, you bring it out in your hero phase, and then you consume it in the phase that you think they're going to get shot. And that gives them a ward based on a dice roll. It's challenging to use at the right time, right? If your opponent's doing multiple things in different phases, do you use it in the shooting phase to prevent them? Are you trying to use it in the hero phase? I used it against Seraphon in one combat, and of course their priest dispelled it because it's only a roll of a 3. So it's interesting. I think you're looking for mortal wounds in the game. That's where the Molten Infernoth comes in with his movement. Maybe that's gotten a little bit better since 2nd edition. I don't think I've looked at it too hard because they don't come off the board anymore, do they? Or do you still have to roll to keep them nearby?
I know with my Daughters of Cain ones, I have to still roll at the end of the combat phase and things like that, and they disappear. And I know at least with my daughters, I have to. But like as Samuel's saying, like if you can't beat them, join them. Bring yourself a dragon if you need to get yourself some movement, some mortal wounds. I think again, you've got the flexibility, you've got some tools, you've got a good ally pool. You bring in some Iron Drakes, bring in some Stormcast, bring in. I think the challenge is where do you get the points, and I think to what you mentioned earlier in the show as well, this list would work perfectly if you want to bring yourself in a Gotrek. So if you find yourself not getting enough punch out of your units, or you're just struggling to handle that Archaon Mega Gargant and the Hearthguard are just not working, and you don't want to run Lofnir, you want to run Hemdar or some other kind of build, then maybe looking into something like Stormcast Ally, Gotrek would work.
I think if I'm critiquing my list, I think I'm trying to pigeonhole myself into Fyreslayers a little bit too much. I think there's probably things out there that are better than Magmadroths for fewer points. Samuel was asking about a dragon for 285 points, and I'm not familiar with the Dragon War Scroll at this point.
I think it's like 12 wounds, 3 up armor save, does a heap of mortal wounds. Like it's good value. I mean, it's not a hero, so you do lose one of the hero slots, but someone probably has to do the science. You probably get more value from the dragon.
Probably, because I'm over investing into making the Magmadroths good, right? I'm taking 2 battle mount traits. I've given them 2 artifacts at this point. So I'm probably over committing into that area for 240 points versus 285 points with a 3-up save. So it's sounding like those are better options.
Well, I think in your type of list, the Lofnir works perfectly going the double Magmadroth. But if you were to go into, say, Hermdar or Volstagg, or even the grey fight, was it Fired, whatever it is, the grey one. You probably wouldn't go double Magmadroth. You might only go 1. That would probably be enough, and you get an extra 200, 300 points to reinfest elsewhere, jack up the reinforcements, bring in a Gotrek, bring in something else.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you've got a dragon that can make it up across the board as quick as your Falstag units are going to make it across the board, why not bring it in there and just hit your opponent hard turn one and see if they can take a punch to the face and then keep going.
Celestian Prime could be another one. That's a nice little, I know it's a little bit more expensive, but it's got a 4-up ward save, comes from the sky, so it gives you another reserve kind of option. Any final advice you'd give us Fyreslayers players? Us, not me. I'm not a Fyreslayer player. I don't even know if I even own a Fyreslayer model. Oh yeah, in Warhammer Quest. Warhammer Quest, you got a model. That's the only Fyreslayer I own. So, but like, what final advice would you give a player who is now taking what you've thought and you've said, and is now going to take them to their next GT?
I think the only way to do it is to get in a character and drink loads of ale, get angry at your opponent, and make sure you both have a good time.
Love it. Mark, I would not take the elf twins. I think they're too expensive. I love the idea of the Lumineth elf twins. I love the idea. Saw the point. Went, no, thank you. I said, no, thank you. I don't know, Travis, have you got any thoughts, or you looked at the warscroll? It's just I think it's like 300 points of just late game shenanigans that it's just like,
I hate shenanigans. Early. Shenanigans is no fun.
Yeah, I mean, they're a great little wrecking ball, but I'd rather Celestian Prime.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just me. But cool. Any final thoughts and comments before I go to my own pizza oven and make up some delicious pizza before I go play our game of Warhammer?
Just appreciate you bringing me on, Anthony. It was fun. I enjoyed the chat, and hopefully people get something good out of it.
Are you on the socials at all? I think I struggled to find you on like Twitter. And are you in the?
Yeah, you had to reach out to the Dragon Slayers and say, "Hey, this guy that's playing Fyreslayers, can he reach out to me?" Yeah.
Are you on like the Fyreslayer Facebook group at all? Like, if people wanted to talk to you, okay, cool. So if people want to talk to you and talk list science, you are on the Fyreslayer Facebook group.
Certainly.
So just type in Age of Sigmar Fyreslayers and you'll find it. There's no secret WhatsApp that I need to share with you.
No, I don't think the requirements to get in there are anything other than, are you human?
Are you Dwarden? Yeah. What do you do with your Urgon?
What is your quest? Yeah.
To seek the Holy Grail. Travis, has been great. I've learned a lot. Good to hear from a Fyreslayer player. Nice to tick this off my bucket list, but more importantly, hopefully has inspired some Fyreslayers players to put their models back on the table, try some new things, explore parts of the book, reconsider their choices. Don't just try to force your second edition list into third. I think, we've proven that it's not about the big blocks like you used to see. MSU, Travis is getting some good work off. But hey, comment section, let me know, like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. But more important, tell me, how are you building your Fyreslayers list? Is Travis missing something that maybe we should reconsider? Is there something that maybe would really supercharge his shooters? Let us know. Love to hear it. All right, Travis, I'm going to my pizza oven. Everyone stay safe, and I don't know, how do we sign off? How do we sign off with Fyreslayers? Do you have a war cry we can sign off with?
Just Skull. Take a drink.
Skull. All right. See you, folks. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.